This week, Conflict Zone is in Berlin, where the government has just registered close to 1 million asylum seekers this year alone. My guest is Peter Altmaier, who's the refugee coordinator and the Chancellor's chief of staff. Has Germany's open door policy been, for the country itself and for Europe, a colossal mistake? Peter Altmaier, welcome to Conflict Zone.
Hello.
Your policies towards migrants and refugees have brought about exactly the kind of Europe that you didn't want to see. It's fences, it's walls, it's freedom of movement suspended, armed guards on the borders. Freedom of movement, it's gone, hasn't it, in Europe?
It's
just what you didn't want.
It's a difficult situation, I admit. But Europe today is in a better shape than 10 years ago when Angela Merkel was elected Chancellor.
Better shape in what way?
In the way that Europe was able over the last 10 years to decide on concrete issues to overcome the European sovereign debt and euro crisis, to play a coherent and convincing role in the Ukrainian crisis. And as far as the refugee crisis is concerned, this is perhaps the biggest refugee movement Europe has seen over the last 60 or 70 years. That's the end of the Second World War.
You say in better shape, but we've seen Europe at each other's throats. Countries in Europe at each other's throats over this. Senior EU official told the Financial Times last week, we only have bad options left. These are options that are painful and require breaking taboos and taking actions that we do not instinctively want to take.
I entirely disagree. Europe has an option to overcome that refugee crisis, and this option is cooperation. This option is coherent cooperation with Turkey and other countries in that region. The option is burden sharing amongst European countries. The option is organizing a better asylum and refugee policy, developing a better protection of the external borders of the European Union. All these pieces are on the table. They have been put on the table by Chancellor Merkel.
But you can't sell them. You can't sell them.
We are in the beginning of a process. This refugee crisis, as far as the current dimension is concerned, was on the table since 4 or 5 months, since summer. Since summer we have decided on 160,000 refugees that will be sent to the different member states.
Yes, do you know how many of those have been sent? Do you know how, by the beginning of this month, how many have been sent? 159.
Yes,
out of 160,000.
That is something that is certainly not acceptable. But as you know, the decision was made that these people shall be sent to the member states
Donald Tusk called it political coercion.
Over the next couple of months.
Donald Tusk, President of the European Council, called it political coercion. That's quite an accusation towards you from somebody as senior as the President of the European Council.
I'm dealing with European politics now for almost 20 years. And I know that it would be a very bad thing to blame each other in Europe. Germany has ever been part of a solution, not part of the problem. And that means that we are working very hard on the European Turkey agenda on migration. We have achieved a result on the European Turkey summit 2 weeks ago, and we will continue this. And at the end of the day, I'm wholeheartedly convinced Europe will come to a coherent common position and will be able to overcome the crisis.
You can't even come to a common position in your own party. In October, 34 regional CDU party officials complained that the policy of open borders didn't accord with European or German law. You can't even sell it to your own party.
That's very old-fashioned news. And when you look at the party convention, we are
Did they write the letter or not?
Organize, yes, but
we
have 500,000 party activists, and out of them, 240 have written a letter. I believe you should be honest to the people on the screens and tell them that we have, as in any other party, political debates. There is freedom of expression,
it's not just debates, huge differences. You have huge differences.
But the Chancellor Merkel enjoys the wholehearted support of the party grassroots, of the party convention, of the group in parliament. We have been able to decide on all the issues by a very large, overwhelming
You've pushed
majority.
them into line. You're telling me you've pushed them into line.
And we have even been able to get a consensus in the Bundesrat, in the second chamber, where the opposition of Green and Social Democratic parties holds a majority. So this is an indication that Germany, challenged by that unprecedented crisis, is able to establish a common position, and we are able to amend our legislation, we are able to deal with the crisis, we are able to accelerate proceedings for asylum seekers. All this has been organized over the last couple of months, and people are now seeing the fruits, and therefore I'm very optimistic that Angela Merkel will continue to enjoy support, public support, not just by the party, but by the people in Germany.
Polls say 2 out of 3 Germans believe the government is doing a rather bad or very bad job in handling the situation. This was an eminent poll taken a month ago. It's not much of an endorsement, is it?
Polls show that Angela Merkel's party, the CDU, is still leading the polls by far.
It's dropped. It has
dropped from 41 to 39, and the next biggest party, the Social Democrats, have still 25. That means we have a larger lead than any other party over the last 20 years.
Two out of 3 Germans believe you're doing a rather bad or a very bad job. That's not a ringing endorsement.
No, that's first of all an opinion. That's first of all an opinion poll, and second, you might not expect people.
Well, you've just been quoting me opinion polls that you like, and I'm quoting you one that you don't like.
You might not expect people to say, "Oh, you are doing a brilliant, good job," as long as the results are not yet clear and visible to everybody. This was a crisis that involves several 100,000 of people coming from the Middle East to Europe and to Germany, and it is, of course, a natural thing that this will take some weeks and months to organize.
Mr. Altmaier, all this agreement that you say you've worked towards, we've seen fighting break out more than once in your own cabinet. The Interior Minister, Thomas de Maizière, twice acted unilaterally to introduce controls on asylum seekers without informing Mrs. Merkel. You called this a communications issue. It's more than a communications issue. It's very different views contained in your own cabinet, isn't it?
That's exactly what it was. We have decided all the issues related to immigration and asylum by unanimity in the cabinet meeting, and this is a clear indication that everything else that you have heard or read has been a communication problem rather than a divergence.
A communications problem from your own Federal Office for Migration and Refugees, which wrote in an open letter just over a month ago that your entry procedures are not fit for purpose, said a large proportion of asylum seekers were giving false identities in order to stay in Germany. Discontinuation of identity checks facilitated infiltration by Islamic State of Iraq. This is coming from your own Federal Office for Migration.
And we have appointed a president of the Office for Refugees and Immigration, Mr. Weise, who is the most experienced senior official in this field. He enjoys the confidence of Chancellor Merkel and the Minister of the Interior.
What's he doing about these issues? What's he doing about these real issues?
And as far as the real issues are concerned, they will be solved one after the other.
Wouldn't it have been nice to actually warn not only your own lender, your own states within Germany, but the rest of Europe, that you were going to throw your doors open and that there were going to be strong implications, severe implications for the rest of the continent? But you didn't do that. You went your own way. You decided what you wanted to do, and you went and did it.
The German constitution is very clear with that respect. And it says political refugees enjoy asylum.
But you blindsided your own states. Malu Dreyer of Rhineland-Palatinate said you blindsided us. This can never happen again. This should never happen again.
Well, you are choosing the quotes you like.
Well, you choose the ones you like. I'm choosing the ones that actually show the division and the opposition that you've been facing.
There are many prime ministers of states and others, like Mr. Kretschmann, for example, who has wholeheartedly supported Angela Merkel's policy. And Angela Merkel has defended several times her policy in the European Council, in the German Bundestag, in cabinet meetings. And we had to make difficult choices. We had to make difficult choices. When there are tens of thousands of refugees moving across 6 or 7 countries, they're coming to the Austrian-German border. Would you then really think you could stop these people by forcing them to return? Do you really believe it would be a good solution to apply?
The criticism isn't about that. The criticism is that when you wanted to do something, out goes consultation, out goes reliability, out goes the consultation with 28 other countries. You did what you wanted, and you left everybody else to pick up the pieces
there was an immediate danger at the beginning of September, where thousands of people, of refugees, were on the streets in Hungary, on the railways, stations, in the trains. And then the question was, in the relationship between Austria and Germany, whether we would allow these people to come to Germany or whether we would try to stop them. Hungary was not able to stop them. No other country in Europe was able to stop them. Neither Greece, nor Croatia, nor Slovenia, nor Serbia, nor Hungary, nor Austria. And that means we had to make up our minds and to find a decision. And if we would have tried to blame other European countries, if we would have tried to return the refugees to Austria or to Hungary or to another country in the neighborhood, we would have risked destabilization Europe. We would not have responded to our humanitarian obligations under the German Constitution and under the Geneva Convention.
And now Donald Tusk, President of the European Council, accuses you of political coercion through your majority voting
That's the second time.
That's the second time you're quoting him. Yes,
you're quoting
to try
him, and I'm responding
and force
to you
through
the second
a response to
time
your
that
policies.
That it is not my task and not my duty to criticize or to attack the President of the European Council.
But he's attacking you. He's attacking you.
No.
When
you read the interview he has made in the Süddeutsche Zeitung, you will come to the conclusion that he has backed Angela Merkel on some of the points. He has also expressed his own personal views on other points, and I think this must be possible even for a President of the European Council.
I think you're putting a nice gloss on this. I think you're putting a nice gloss on this.
And as far
that's what I'd expect you to do. But the fact is that he speaks of huge division over this, and not just from Central Europe and Eastern Europe, but other countries that are not prepared to share in your quota allocations and relocation plans for the refugees around you.
We have,
and 159 out of 160,000 speaks to that.
There has been a large majority in the Council for relocation of 160,000 people. We are now talking about quotas for Turkey.
But it hasn't happened.
We are now talking about quotas for Turkey. And at the end of the day, you will see that we will be able to agree on a joint concept. I have no idea whether all European countries will join. And especially the new member countries in Eastern and Central Europe have difficulties to admit refugees within their borders. We have always expressed our belief that this is a crisis that can be solved together, if we want to solve it together, and that everybody should take part in the burden-sharing process and mechanism. We are continuing to do this, but we are not waiting until the last member state of the European Union has made up his mind. We have an obligation to act with the countries willing
exactly. Consensus goes out the window. Consensus goes out the window. You just push through because you're big and powerful. You push through what you want.
Consensus went out of the window when during the Second Iraq War, when Europe was not able to decide on its own position because old Europe was blocking new Europe, and there have been the friends of the US and the opponents of the US fighting each other. That was a total blockade where nothing was possible. In this refugee crisis, the EU-Turkey summit took place. It was able to adopt a conclusion. It was able to adopt a migration agenda. And the fact that we have debates and that we have some divisions, I admit, this is something natural in such an enormous crisis, and you cannot expect 28 countries to agree from the beginning on every single step, but we are working in Europe together. All our member countries are partners and friends.
I hear you, Peter Altmaier. I am puzzled where this open door policy comes from. This is the same Chancellor who 5 years ago declared multiculturalism had failed in Germany. In October 2010, she told the CDU youth wing, of course the tendency has been to say, let's adopt the multicultural concept and live happily side by side, but this concept has failed and failed utterly.
Exactly. It has failed, and there will be no revival of it. All the refugees,
what takes its place?
All the refugees coming to Germany, and the ones who will stay for a longer period will have access to language training, to professional training.
So integration instead of multiculturalism?
Yeah, exactly. We want them to integrate. And when you look at the large population of immigrants which arrived in Germany over the last 30, 40 years, most of them have been integrated successfully, because over the last 10 years we have increased our efforts for integration, and we have offered them possibilities to integrate. We have ask them to integrate. And
how successful is that going to be when you're already having to make provision to separate gay refugees from others who have been harassing them? 3 to 6 cases a week of asylum seekers harassing gay refugees in Berlin-Brandenburg. They came to Germany to be harassed.
Yeah,
they wanted to leave that behind in Syria.
But may I remind you that
they're being segregated.
Sexual harassment, whether it is hetero or whether it is a guy, is not confined to immigrants and asylum seekers.
It's not, but you're having to separate.
You're
having to separate asylum seekers.
It happens across the world.
Segregation in Europe in 2015.
No, it's not a segregation. What we are doing is to protect vulnerable people. That is a commitment under the Geneva Convention, under European directives, and at the end of the day, we are very optimistic that a large majority of the young people coming from Syria, from northern Iraq, and other countries in that region are interested in our culture and our values, and they are interested in our language, and therefore we are optimistic that we are able to integrate
And the
them.
backlash from the local population here, already 222 attacks have been recorded on refugee shelters.
Those attacks have been
only
awful.
4 convictions. Yeah. Only 4 convictions.
No, the procedures are going on. These attacks are awful. We detest them. But at the same time, we had a wave of support from the local population, and that still continues. Whenever and wherever
what do you think these refugees will remember?
Arriving,
attacks or support?
There are volunteers.
222 this year.
Supporting the refugees. And whenever there is a criminal attack on a refugee camp or on a refugee as a person, then it will be persecuted by police and by the persecutor and the law attorney. That is the state of law that we have in Germany.
Peter Altmaier, let's talk a bit about the Parliament voting last week to send soldiers and hardware to support the anti-ISIS coalition. On the one hand, the Chancellor says it is perfectly clear that the real solution can only lie in a political solution. If that's true, why send hardware at all? Just for show?
No, we have the refugee crisis that can be solved only politically, and we have the Syrian crisis, where many actors on the ground are applying military force
and making no progress whatsoever.
And therefore, it is in the fight against international terrorism, and in particular in the fight against the Islamic states threatening Europe by terrorist plots. It is important that an alliance of Western countries and countries in the regions are fighting those terrorists, and that's exactly what we are doing. We are lending
Peter Altmaier, this is a group that has no ground strategy, no exit strategy, no plan of campaign, and is hopelessly disunited. Look at the latest spat between Turkey and Iraq, for instance.
It is
hopelessly disunited.
But first of all, there are, of course, ground troops, as, for example, the Peshmerga in northern Iraq. We have sent weapons to them last year. We are organizing training for them since last year. They have been able to fight IS quite successfully in that region. They have
and yet the Americans 3 months ago said the fight was stalemated.
And the second point is, in Syria, we have seen that many of the terrorist links to the terrorists of Paris came from Syria, where foreign fighters, where IS terrorists are planning and plotting, and therefore we have decided to join the international alliance, and I believe it is the right choice.
You're joining an alliance that could last 10 years, that the Americans have already said is stalemated in its fight against ISIS. This is a terrorist group that has an address. People have been bombing it for almost 18 months, and yet the fight is stalemated still.
I don't know.
It's not a winning formula that you're joining, is it? It's not a winning coalition. On the contrary, it's going nowhere.
But nobody knows. We have decided 15...
That's not a very optimistic assessment.
We have decided 14 years ago to join the alliance in Afghanistan, and we have fought the Taliban quite successful, but we have not yet stabilized the country as we would have wished for.
So you're there for the long term, are you?
We are now joining this alliance again.
For the long term?
Because, no, it is, first of all, it is confined to 1 year. And then we have to go to Parliament, and we have to ask Parliament whether to go on or whether to stop. This is the same, by the way, for Afghanistan. And that means we are keeping control of the entire process at every moment. And that's exactly what we owe to all these soldiers we are sending to Syria and to the region. It's not the first foreign action that we are taking. It is not the biggest one, but it is an important one.
All right,
and we believe we have to be successful, and we can be successful.
You're a country that prides yourself on being a moral state. You care about human rights. But you trade extensively, despite heavy criticism from human rights groups, with Uzbekistan, which has an appalling human rights record. In March, you failed to do what Amnesty International asked you to do, which was to demand that Uzbekistan clears up its human rights record. On the contrary, you signed a €2.8 billion trade package. Are you proud of your links with this country?
We have links with many countries across the world.
I didn't ask you. I asked whether you were proud of this.
This is a normal situation in a globalized world. But whenever we are doing politics, we always insist on the respect for human rights, regardless whether we are making deals with countries in Asia or in Africa or in
Well, you seem
Latin
to have forgotten to do that in this instance.
Germany is a country, and everybody knows that, where we have always been aware of the importance of human rights protection.
Do you know how they torture people in Uzbekistan? They asphyxiate them, they rape, they use electric shocks, and they pour boiling water over the naked bodies of their victims. And you tell me this is a normal situation in a globalized world.
If this is true, it is totally unacceptable. Totally unacceptable.
But it doesn't give you any pause for thought in your trade dealings, does it? You're quite happy to go and trade with them. €2.8 billion this year.
No, this is totally unjust what you're saying, because we are acting in coherence with the international community. And whenever...
It's not the international community that signed this deal, it's Germany.
Whenever sanction has been applied, Germany has fully respected the sanctions. And then it's up to the international community to decide whether they would apply sanctions or not.
And Saudi Arabia, you're happy to do? They're the third largest recipient of your weapons and your military hardware. And they have an appalling human rights record as well.
There are many other countries worldwide
what about these?
Where the human rights record is not perfect, and we are working to improve it wherever we can. But as far as Saudi Arabia is concerned, there is a lot of criticism vis-à-vis Saudi Arabia, but it is a stabilizing factor in the region where many countries have collapsed. And
not according to your intelligence service.
It will be very difficult for you to identify truly democratic states where the rule of law is guaranteed in the entire region of the Middle East, except Israel and one or two other countries.
Your own intelligence
in most of the countries, you can identify problematic points, and whenever they are identified, we are trying to help people. But at the same time, international trade continues. This is the same for the United Kingdom, for the US, for France, for any other country.
In the case of Saudi Arabia, your own intelligence service says it's now pursuing impulsive interventionist policies. Again, does that give you pause for thought?
Of course, we have our intelligence agency exactly for the purpose to know what is going on in every country.
But you'll trade anyway. You don't really give it any thought at all, do you?
But
You're just going to trade whatever the human rights issues.
I'm now really astonished. A trade embargo. If we would apply trade embargoes and sanctions to any country where human rights are not fully respected, there would be almost no trade anymore across the world.
Peter Altmaier, we're going to leave it there. Thanks very much for being on Conflict Zone.
Thank you.
Thank you.